Morning sunlight filtered through the towering oaks of Oakdale Overlook, casting a pattern of dappled shadows across the narrow forest trails. Ranger Addison Davis breathed in the crisp air, adjusting the brim of her broad hat as she began her morning patrol. This place was her sanctuary, as of dense woodlands, winding trails, and lively critters creating an orchestra of earthy scents and melodic birdsong. Yet in the last few days, the forest's peace had been disrupted by a new tension. A young hiker, Gregory Marsh, had vanished without a trace. Though local search parties scoured the trails and investigative teams combed the area, no one had found a single clue pointing to Gregory's last known location. Addison refused to succumb to despair. She knew every inch of these woods, where the deer stampeded at dawn, where the squirrels stored their hidden acorns, and which trails became soggy under heavy rain. If anyone could find Gregory, it was her. Her official responsibilities included routine patrols, ensuring hikers followed park guidelines, and educating visitors about wildlife conservation. That morning she had an added task: examine the remote trails for any overlooked signs of the missing hiker. She walked with unwavering focus, scanning the mossy floor for footprints, broken branches, or scraps of clothing. The air felt thinner than usual, as though the forest held its breath, waiting for Addison to solve the puzzle. With every silent step deeper into the woodland, she remained determined. She had read the report from local law enforcement. Gregory was an experienced outdoorsman who had set out alone to capture pictures of rare bird species. It seemed unthinkable that he would lose his way so quickly. Something else had to be at play here. The first hint of something unusual came from a carvings left in the bark of an ancient oak. Addison noticed it from a distance, harsh slashes cutting into the trunk, as if someone had deliberately etched a symbol. She peered closer. Inside the grooves was a carefully carved shape that resembled a bird in flight, though a portion was missing, or perhaps scraped away. It looked recent. The wood shavings had not yet darkened or hardened with time, which suggested it was only a few days old at most, the same period during which Gregory had vanished. Addison took a photograph of the carving with her phone. Although it seemed out of place, it might be a clue. Searching nearby, she found faint footprints leading off the standard hiking trail. She recognized the winding path well enough. It was rarely trodden, and eventually vanished near a deep ravine. As she walked, she caught a sense of something else. More carvings, similar in style, on adjacent trees. Each carving was a variation of the first symbol, sometimes reversed or layered with small lines, as though someone were leaving cryptic messages in the wood. With energy surging through her, Addison realized this wasn't just random vandalism. It felt methodical, like a breadcrumb trail carved into bark. Perhaps Gregory had done this while trying to find his way, or leave signals for rescuers. Or, more disturbingly, someone else had left marks to lead him astray. Over lunch, Addison joined Penelope Gray, the local historian and amateur wildlife photographer, at the visitor center's small cafe. The smell of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked bread provided a cozy comfort, in contrast to the seriousness of the forest. As Addison sipped hot tea, she explained the odd carvings she'd discovered, describing the bird-like shape on the trunk. Penelope's eyes lit up at the mention of carved symbols. "I've seen something like that before," Penelope reflected. She leaned forward, carefully pushing away her half-eaten sandwich. "A few years back, I was researching local folklore. There are stories of old symbols used by early settlers or by travelers to mark hidden routes. Some are just random whittling. Others supposedly represent secret codes." Addison conjured up the image of the carved bird again. "But why would Gregory or anyone else carve these symbols into the trees? If it's some kind of message, it's incredibly cryptic." Penelope paused, tapping her fingers against the table. What if Gregory was trying to signal that he was being forced to take a certain route? Or maybe the carvings existed before Gregory even got here, and he followed them without realizing they led him off the main trail. The notion unsettled Addison. She leaned back in her chair, eyes briefly drifting to a map of the park pinned on the wall. If Gregory left them, then they could guide us to where he might have gone. But if he followed them instead, we need to find out where they end, and if they truly connect to his disappearance. Penelope's gaze flicked between Addison and the map. We can do some research on local stories and see if the symbol matches anything in the historical records. Meanwhile, you keep an eye out for more carvings, Addison nodded, finishing her cup of tea. I'll take pictures of each carving and see if there's a pattern. That afternoon, Addison ventured back into the woods, charting a new route from one tree carving to the next. Each symbol was distinct yet related, an abstract bird shape, sometimes accompanied by short lines in groups of 3. She labeled them with tiny ribbons so she wouldn't overlook any. Carefully, she documented every twist and turn of the faint footprints that accompanied the carvings, though the footprints themselves were inconsistent, sometimes leading to a stream, other times abruptly disappearing among thick underbrush. Still, the deeper Addison traveled, the more she had a growing sense of being watched. The forest canopy grew denser, filtering sunlight into patches of gold on the ground. The wind sighed in the high branches and the undergrowth rustled with small creatures. Addison would occasionally stoop to examine the forest floor. Other times she stood, peering through her binoculars to search for additional carvings on distant trunks. Her heart pounded when, around a bend in a seldom-used trail, she spotted a more elaborate carving. This one featured the same bird shape, but was far more intricately done. It included a swirling design for wings, along with a small line resembling a path cutting across the bird's outline. She stepped up to it carefully. The wood shavings on the ground were fresh, the trunk's exposed bark almost starkly pale in its newness. A thick hush enveloped the area, as if the forest itself held its breath for an explanation. Could this be the final marker Gregory left, or was it another misdirection? Addison gently touched the carving, feeling the grooves under her fingertips. It carried an odd sense of urgency, as if someone had poured emotion or desperation into the act of carving. That evening, Addison spread out her photographs and notes on her small kitchen table. A single lamp illuminated the images and scribbled charts. She tried to see a pattern in the shapes, a route they could form on the park map. Letting out a sigh, she flipped through the photographs once again. The swirling bird, the short trio of lines, the occasionally reversed figure. It all must mean something. She placed each photo onto a large map of Oakdale Overlook. Using a pen, she circled the approximate location of each carving. Before long, it began to resemble a lopsided spiral snake path across the forest. The phone buzzed, jolting Addison from her thoughts. Penelope's calm voice carried through. "I've been digging through old manuscripts and local archives," she announced, excitement lifting her tone. "There's an old legend in this area about a reclusive group of homesteaders who used hidden symbols on trees to mark safe paths. They often used a bird symbol, which sometimes symbolized travel or a guide. But there's a twist. One version of the symbol included lines marking misfortune. 3 lines crossing the bird's flight path." Addison glanced again at the photographs. Most of the carvings have the 3 lines or partial lines. Maybe it's symbolic for danger ahead. "It could be a warning," Penelope mused. "Or a trap. The old stories say these signs could also be used to lure unwanted visitors into an ambush." A chill travelled up Addison's spine. The notion of a centuries-old trap sounded far-fetched, but the parallels were unsettling. She thanked Penelope, hung up, and stared at the array of evidence on her table. The carved bird might not simply be an innocent symbol or a harmless form of self-expression in the woods. There was a history here, entangled with Gregory's disappearance. Determined to investigate further, Addison set out early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen. She carried a backpack with extra water, energy bars, a flashlight, and a small first aid kit. The path she followed was the newly discovered route of the carvings. A persistent hush lay over the forest. The usual chatter of small wildlife was subdued, as though the birds and squirrels sensed a disturbance best left alone. As she followed the patterned markings, Addison discovered that the footprints had become clearer after a small clearing near a mossy boulder. The soft ground captured distinct tread shapes that she recognized from typical hiking boots. She traced them for about half a mile until they veered off unexpectedly towards an area known for loose soil and hidden sinkholes. She recalled from ranger training that this part of the forest was more dangerous, dotted with sudden drop-offs and thick brambles. Soon, she spotted a cluster of ferns near a felled tree. The footprints led straight to the trunk, and etched in the bark of the fallen tree was the largest bird carving she had seen so far. It radiated an artistry and depth beyond what the others possessed. The lines that had previously been short, neatly grouped strokes now spread into a labyrinthine design weaving through the bird's wings. Like a puzzle that signaled a potential destination close by, Addison knelt by the trunk to examine the carving more closely. In the jagged edges of the carved lines, she spotted tiny shards of fabric clinging to a splinter of wood. She carefully picked them free. The scraps looked like they might be from a hiking jacket or backpack. Was it Gregory's? Her pulse quickened at the possibility. She pressed further into the dense region of the park, passing an uneven slope leading down into a ravine. The tree canopy above had grown so thick that the sunlight barely slipped through, casting the forest floor in a haunted twilight. Addison turned on her flashlight, scanning each trunk for additional carvings, but for a time she saw nothing, just a long stretch of woodland that seemed to deepen in stillness. Finally, she found a newly sliced branch with a fresh slash across the bark. Though not the distinctive bird shape, it showed a stylized arrow etched in the wood. Near the base of the trunk, the leaf litter was disturbed, as though someone had knelt or fallen there. Carefully, Addison crouched to examine the ground. Her heart paused when she saw droplets of dried blood across some leaves. It wasn't much, but it was enough to suggest that someone had been injured. And if that someone was Gregory, he might be hurt and in need of rescue. She radioed back to the ranger station, informing them that she had found potential evidence of the missing hiker. She requested an emergency search team in case her search uncovered a more substantial lead. Armed with deeper resolve, Addison continued ahead, scanning the forest floor. The thickness of the air, the hush of the branches overhead, and the wavering light put her on edge. She forced herself to remain calm and methodical, stepping carefully to avoid disturbing footprints or blood droplets that might guide her to Gregory. Next door, a short distance away, she noticed another tree bearing the carved bird, this time partially cut off by a deep crack in the trunk. It looked as if lightning had struck the tree years ago, leaving splits in the wood. The shape was faint, possibly older than the others. On the ground, however, was a newly placed marker, a ring of small stones with a smooth, flat stone in the middle. On that stone was a faint swirl etched into its surface with chalk. Addison's brows knit in confusion. This was clearly man-made. Who created it? Was it Gregory? Someone else searching for him? Or perhaps a person with questionable intentions? She studied the ground around the stone circle. More disrupted leaves suggested that someone might have set up a makeshift camp. Then she found a water bottle. The label was partially peeled off, but it was recent, no cracks or discoloration from sun exposure. She carefully placed the water bottle in a plastic evidence bag. If this was indeed Gregory's, it could be his final resting spot, or a point where he paused to find direction. Addison noticed more footprints leading away from the ring of stones, heading deeper into the ravine. Determined yet anxious, she followed. The slope was slick with mud, and brambles caught at her clothes. One wrong step would send her sliding down into the rocky base of the ravine. With her flashlight guiding her way, she occasionally glimpsed movement in the underbrush, a fox or perhaps a deer. But each time it vanished quickly, leaving behind rustling leaves and Addison's rising heartbeat. It was nearly midday when she found a clearing near the edge of the ravine. The trees opened up, allowing a swath of sunlight to flood the ground. In that illumination stood a small, weathered cabin. Addison hadn't realized such a structure existed here. It was off the main trails and not listed on any updated maps. She approached cautiously. The wooden boards showed signs of rot, and vines twisted around its base. The door was slightly ajar, creaking with each gentle push of the wind. She stepped carefully onto the rickety porch, heart pounding in her chest, and called out, "Gregory? Are you in there?" No answer. She gently pushed open the door, shining her flashlight into the dim interior. Dust floated through the rays of sunlight, revealing a single room with the remnants of old furniture. A table lay overturned, shelves lined one wall, filled with obscured glass jars and tattered books. As Addison's eyes adjusted, she noticed fresh footprints in the dust. Someone had been there recently. She moved deeper inside, her nerves taut. It was then that she saw a figure huddled in the corner, barely visible behind an old trunk. She took a cautious step forward. "Hello," she said gently, lowering the flashlight beam. Her voice caught as the figure stirred. A worn backpack with missing straps lay beside him. His clothes were torn, dried blood stained one sleeve, and his eyes flickered with exhaustion. It was Gregory Marsh. Gregory blinked, relief surfacing in his gaze at the sight of a park ranger uniform. Addison knelt beside him, checking his vitals. He looked dehydrated and shaken. She offered him water from her canteen, and he sipped carefully before speaking in a hoarse whisper. "I got lost," he explained when he'd recovered enough to speak. "I followed some strange carvings, thinking they led to a hidden scenic overlook. Then a storm hit, and everything became disorienting. I slipped down a muddy slope and injured my arm pretty badly." He gestured at the dried blood on his sleeve. Addison nodded. "We've been searching for you for days. You're lucky you found this cabin." Gregory's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I didn't find it by chance. I think someone was guiding me here, though I never saw who they were. I kept seeing fresh carvings on trees they left behind, like they wanted me to follow them." His words sent a flicker of alarm through Addison. "You never saw them, but you're sure the carvings were for you?" Gregory nodded, recalling what happened with a trembling sigh. "Whoever it was carved those bird symbols. I was afraid it might be a trick, but it was the only lead I had. Then I found these old bandages and a bit of food in here, just enough to keep me going, but I never heard any voices, never saw another soul. It's as if someone was here, helping from afar." Addison radioed for a medical evacuation. While waiting for the rescue team, she helped Gregory drink more water and offered him a few energy bars. She stepped outside to ensure the rescuers could locate them quickly in the clearing. As she stood on the creaking porch, scanning the tree line, she spotted a flash of motion near the forest's edge. Whoever or whatever it was vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving Addison with the distinct impression of being watched. Once the rescue team arrived, they transported Gregory out of the ravine with specialized equipment. Addison showed them the path she had taken, pointing out the treacherous spots while the team carefully maneuvered the injured hiker. All the while, Addison's curiosity churned. The question wouldn't leave her mind. Who had carved these symbols if not Gregory himself? And why guide him to the cabin and then disappear? By late afternoon, Gregory was on his way to the local hospital where he would receive proper treatment. Addison filled out the official report, detailing the location of the carvings, the evidence found along the way, and the final discovery of Gregory. When the dust settled, she returned to the trunk of one of the last carved trees to examine the symbols again. She found a new mark etched beside the bird, a swirl that looked similar to the chalk swirl on the stone earlier, but overshadowed by a carefully carved letter G. Night fell, and Addison found herself once more seated at her small kitchen table, under the glow of a single lamp. She examined her notes, the new swirl, carving, and the G etched next to it. Could the letter stand for Gregory's name, or something else entirely? She thought back to the moment she discovered him in the cabin. He insisted he was led there, that the carvings weren't his doing, but he wasn't certain about the identity of his mysterious guide, or if their motives had been benevolent or malevolent. The doorbell rang, startling her. She opened the door to find Penelope, holding a small leather-bound book. Her eyes danced with excitement. I found a record mentioning that some local families used to leave encoded carvings to point lost travelers toward safety. Oakdale Overlook used to be rife with hidden shelters. This old cabin is likely one of them. It's tradition, or at least the legend claims so. Addison's mouth parted in surprise. So, those carvings might be an ancient custom to help travelers in need? Penelope shrugged. It lines up with the story about a group that once lived here, known for clandestine generosity. They never revealed themselves, but they would guide lost souls to safe havens. I guess in modern times that legend seems bizarre. But maybe someone out there is carrying on the tradition. Days later, Gregory recuperated in the hospital, regaining strength in his injured arm. Addison visited him, bringing a small bouquet of local wildflowers as a gesture of Park Service goodwill. He seemed grateful, though his eyes still held a flicker of confusion whenever the events came up. I remember hearing something, like footsteps or distant whistling in the forest, Gregory recalled. But whenever I tried to follow, I'd only find a newly carved symbol. It was almost comforting, like a silent promise that help was near. Addison nodded. It's possible. There's someone who makes sure lost hikers find their way to safety. Maybe they prefer to stay hidden. We probably owe them gratitude for saving your life. Gregory looked uncertain, but relief clearly shone in his face. I'd like to meet whoever did it. I'd like to thank them. Addison smiled softly. Maybe someday you will, but until then it looks like the forest holds its share of secrets. She considered telling him about the old diaries and Penelope's findings, but decided against overwhelming him in his current fragile state. Instead, she patted his hand gently, wishing him a swift recovery. In the following weeks, Oakdale Overlook regained its sense of tranquility. The missing hiker case was officially resolved, but rumors lingered in the small town. Some residents speculated about a hidden hermit who roamed the forest, protecting anyone who got lost. Others believed it was a ghostly guardian from the old days, fulfilling a centuries-old vow. Park visitors spoke of freshly carved symbols spotted on remote trails, though none reported feeling threatened by the phenomenon. Rather, they felt reassured if they stumbled upon a carving while disoriented. Addison returned to her daily patrols, each passing day reaffirming her respect for the forest's hidden intricacies. Sometimes she would spot a new carving on a tree trunk, always the graceful shape of a bird in flight. She would document it, make sure it led nowhere dangerous, and leave it undisturbed. Those carvings served as a silent sign, a reminder that help could be offered in unexpected ways, if only one recognized the clues. And on a calm autumn morning, as the sun's rays shimmered across the canopy, Addison walked a familiar path in the park's deeper regions. There, near one of the oldest oaks, she noticed a faint new carving that caught her eye. Approaching, she found the same swirl that had been etched in chalk weeks before, now carefully carved into the wood, accompanied by an initial that could have been a stylized A, her own initial. She traced the lines gently with her fingertips. No footprints or signs hinted at who might have done it. Yet she felt a connection, a sense that she was neither alone nor unappreciated in her mission to protect and care for these woods. The silent caretaker, whoever it was, had acknowledged her role in reuniting Gregory with safety. This circle of kindness and guidance, carved into the living bark of Oakdale Overlook, was a testament to the unseen bonds that linked people to the forest and to one another. Addison smiled, adjusting her ranger hat. The forest rustled as a breeze passed through its leaves, whispering secrets that only those who truly listened could hear. She turned back toward the main trail, her steps light on the soft pine needles, feeling certain that every time a person wandered off the beaten path, there would be a clue waiting, and Oakdale Overlook, in its quiet wisdom, would guide lost souls home.